are these people?
Um, so we talked about Bernie earlier in my last segment. We're going to talk about Khanna now. Actually, this was kind of not to say this was new to me, this issue, but I've heard murmurings of this in terms of organization that both Reef and I, and probably many of you all are familiar with. But this week, they're actually, I think, in light of other issues regarding universal healthcare in this country, they actually are making a move in this now with an actual bill. So Ro Khanna is going to present a bill to free people from their medical debt.
Gotcha.
So he had a town hall about this on Monday, which just looking at the analytics of that video wasn't very well viewed at all. I think it only got like less than 100 views at the time when I
Right.
looked at I think when I looked at it last night, which considering and I do have some criticism on this, but I think the issue of itself is is a worthwhile cause to fight for. Because we probably know people in our lives who struggle with medical debt, especially large medical debt, especially for a huge medical issue.
Yep.
That you're kind of saddled with even after insurance takes care of partially part of your payments. So as I said, Ro Khanna had what was a part of this town hall on Monday, which was hosted by Our Revolution, which is Bernie's like group that he founded during his tenure like election. So according to hold on, let's see if I get going. Another Common Dreams article. This is written by Jessica Corbett, where she writes medical freedom from medical debt campaign to launch with virtual town hall.
Yep.
The new push is led by Our Revolution, along with Ro Khanna and Bernie Sanders, Medicare for All supporters who are working on legislation to tackle medical debt. So she writes, I'm 72 and now live with my daughter after losing everything because of medical bills. I had $250,000 in debt saved up for retirement, and then disaster hit, several bouts of cancer, and a stroke in 2009. That's the story of Amazonian Deanne McNeil, a patient advocate and member of Our Revolution, which is working with U.S. Rep. Ro Khanna, Bernie Sanders, the National Consumer Law Center, and TRIDEC DC on a new campaign.
I am once again asking for your financial support.
Basically. You should have played that for the other.
I know.
Segment.
I was thinking that too.
The Freedom from Medical Debt initiative launched on Monday with a virtual town hall. I wouldn't owe anything if hospitals didn't gouge patients, said Mary Wills of Texas. The cost of an MRI in the hospital was 8 times the cost of an outpatient MRI and 80 times outsourced MRIs. Right. I owe over $8,000.
Yep.
The virtual town hall is set to feature similar stories, including that of Washingtonian Kristen Noreen, who barely survived being hit by a vehicle while on her bicycle in 2010. After enduring a brain injury and having her hand amputated and reattached, Noreen is still paying off medical bills for pain treatments not covered by insurance. Fellow patient advocate and Our Revolution member Elizabeth McLaughlin of Indiana, who received a $20,000 bill for an emergency visit in 2015, also plans to join the town hall along with Khanna. We need to strategize for legislation Bernie Sanders and I are doing and figure out how we can finally end medical debt in this country, Khanna said in a Monday video promoting the event. The lawmakers have worked together for years. Khanna co-chaired Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign and both support Medicare for All, for which the senator has long led the fight on Capitol Hill. Not really, but we'll continue.
Yeah.
In a Saturday email about the town hall, Our Revolution, which came out of Sanders' 2016 presidential run, said that as the senator and Rep. Premier Jayapal prepare to reintroduce Medicare for All in Congress, I'll talk about that in a second. We are organizing people struggling with medical debt to speak up and fight for healthcare justice. The Hill, which first reported on the town hall, noted that in addition to backing Khanna and Sanders' forthcoming bill, patient advocates are hoping to pressure President Joe Biden to use executive action to help stop price gouging for vulnerable patients and the variety of predatory debt collection tactics, and ensure that people seeking medical assistance have financial aid and free or reduced price care available. Highlighting that medical debt is the #1 reason for personal bankruptcies in the United States, Our Revolution Executive Director Joseph Gigarsi told the outlet, "We can stop that, and the president has the power." As part of the campaign calling for Congress and the president to deliver systemic solutions to this massive healthcare injustice, organizers have launched a website to collect medical debt stories and hope to get at least one from every congressional district.
Okay.
So we talked offline about this just before we went live, and I'm sure we're kind of bringing it up again. And as I said to you, I'm mixed on this.
Okay.
On one hand, is medical debt something worth fighting for? Absolutely. You know, I just, as an aside, I personally just paid off. So it wasn't much, but you know, like kind of tight finances right now. I just recently paid off some of my medical bills that I had just from normal doctor visits because I am immune compromised. So now I owe another bill because I just went to the doctor recently for another checkup. So, so yes, it's a worthwhile thing that I think people should be fighting for. The problem that I have with this, and we're gonna watch part of the town hall where Rokan spoke. The whole thing is about, I think, just under an hour long. This just kind of seemed to come out of left field for me in terms of there was no marketing or no talk about this. That I'm sure there probably were murmurings, but there wasn't a major thing, especially independent media.
Not in our circles, right?
Not within our circles that people were talking about this in a way that would have been a huge lead up to, you know, to Roe speaking at this event. But you notice how when a certain person 2 years ago had an event like this regarding Medicare for All, that the people that should have been there, the politicians that should have been there, didn't show up, right? And that town hall had, I think about, if I remember correctly, had 10,000 people watching. This town hall with Khanna had in it, as I checked yesterday, only had less than 100 views on it when I pulled a clip for it last night. So to go from Force to Vote, where you had more of an interest and people were invested, especially given that we were in the middle of a pandemic at the time, to now where less than 100 people are watching something, which I do think is important, but there was no lead up to it. So it just kind of seemed to go under the radar if we didn't hear about it, you know, at least in my case on Twitter.
Well, video time, huh?
Yeah. So let's not gonna play all of it because it's mostly stories of people sharing about their experiences. So, and you know, I don't think we necessarily need to know the despair that people are going through.
Right.
But I do want to play what Khanna is talking about, because he's also been on mainstream media talking about this now, that there's a bill that they're trying to promote in Congress next week. So we are going to play a little bit in terms of what he said, and probably will stop at a couple of places just to kind of critique, a couple of things that he says here.
Cool.
So.
Now it's my honor to welcome our next guest, United States Representative Khanna. Ro has been a longtime progressive.
Who is this Hunger Games host character that they're employing to host this?
That is hold on, let me pull up his name.
Joseph.
Yeah.
Givarhayes.
Yeah.
Javorhes.
Yes, he's the executive director for Our Revolution. So
gotcha.
Ally in the United States House, and he's a partner with us on this campaign to end medical debt once and for all. As many of you know, he served as a co-chair of Bernie's 2020 campaign, and is an active member of Our Revolution. If you have questions for Representative Khanna, please put them in the Q&A. Ro, appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be here and listen to the stories that we've collected. Tell us a little bit about what you and your colleagues are thinking about in terms of solutions to address the problem of medical debt.
Well, first of all, Joseph, thank you. Thank you for your leadership.
Which was essentially, tell us about the bill you made.
Right. Going back to the early 2000s and fighting to end medical debt. The only sad thing is we still have medical debt that's growing, even though you've been leading this fight. And we have raised a lot of awareness, but we've now got to actually end the debt. And thank you to Betsy and all of the stories. I mean, it is so common to hear about people who have $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 of credit card debt. I mean, some where they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars of bills, but many Americans where they're sitting with this debt, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, never ending, paying the late interest fees on it, just because they broke a bone and went to the ER, or because they had emergency surgery, or because they had an unexpected medical procedure. This is just wrong. You should not go into debt because you fall sick. And I met about a year ago with a group in my office, March for Medicare for All, and Savage Joy, and they've got an organization in 60 different states. And someone brought a bill for probably about 1,000 pages. It was bigger than any book in my room of all the bills that she had. And it's just outrageous that we're allowing this to happen in the.
Yep.
So just to give some context, so we were aware of this. So those of you who are familiar with the March for Medicare for All, Savage Joy and a couple of other representatives did meet with Ro Khanna in Congress last spring to talk about Medicare for All, but Joy also used that opportunity to kind of share her stories regarding the medical debt and the bills that she's had.
Right.
So from that,
right, he's going to try and give a crumb, a Band-Aid,
Right.
Okay.
So,
cool.
So just to kind of give you that
States
context.
of America. And that's why Bernie Sanders and I are teaming up. We've been working for about 6 months, and it's in the final stages to be introduced of legislation. And Joseph, I know you've been very, very helpful in that process as well. And the legislation will say that we're going to end all medical debt, cancel it. If you have medical debt, it's erased to zero. Now the hospitals need to wipe it out. And
then what, Ro? Then what? Okay, we get rid of debt. You know what still happens? People going into medical debt.
Well, hold on. Before we go further, he said something interesting. He said that they've been working on it from the last 6 months. So they just finalized it. So let's do a little math. So now they're doing this now. it's now May. If they've been working on it since 6 months, meaning they started working on this since November, October,
Right.
November. Joy and Ricky and some other people met with him last April.
Yes.
So what does that tell you? They started working on this bill probably after the elections, the midterms rather. So instead of working with urgency to craft a bill, maybe and again, I'm just thinking
It's
like
after
in
they
an
started
activist
losing.
mind. Right. Maybe thinking from an activist mindset, because and I'm going to be very fair, because I mentioned several streams ago, like the organization that I'm familiar with, we supported in drafting a bill towards teacher retention in DC. Now, it's a lot of work, like you have to, like, there were notes that we had to take, and things had to be tweaked, and the language had to be right, so it took us maybe about 6 months, like that process of going back and forth, like not me directly, but then like my executive director, but our executive director asked us like what we should prioritize, and we told him we voted for it, and all that. He took the notes, the senior members of our organization who took the notes, passed it off to our councilman. It took about 6 months. So I don't want to, so I'm sure like working on bills like this on the federal level, I'm sure, as he said, it was like 1,000 pages that had to be looked over and tweaked.
Yeah.
So, but here's my issue with this. You started working on this, assuming if I get the timeline right, in November. So I'm assuming you worked on this post midterms. Why didn't you work with any urgency to try and create something, or at least mention this well before midterms as incentive for Democrat voters to vote for the party?
Right.
Like, so this just kind of implies you're waited, and now that the Republicans are in office with a bill, now you're bringing it.
Yeah.
You haven't mentioned this at all, as far as I know, on mainstream media or any other independent platform that he's been on, since. Has not mentioned it. And again, I'm going to give grace, especially if it's a bill. You may not necessarily be able to say anything until a certain point. But, as I said, there was no build up to this because everyone is talking about Medicare for all. Now, all of a sudden, you're switching your plan to let's cancel medical debt.
Right.
Again, I think, is that valid thing to fight for? Yes. But those are conversations that I think, especially in independent media, should have been had all along for like the last year or so.
Yep.
Like, this shouldn't be no surprise to people, like, especially given that they had a virtual town hall on this on Monday. No one knew about it. Like, no one was promoting this. Like, and again, I just happened to find this on Twitter randomly, and I felt like it was a story that should be talked about. Like, but again, going back to a few years ago, when Jimmy and Bree and Crystal and other people, like Kyle, had that town hall regarding forced to vote, Khanna and the squad were nowhere to be found.
Yep.
And they had a lot of views for that stream.
Well,
but yeah, you only had 100 people coming to this.
Yes.
For an issue that relates to Medicare for all. That it doesn't make sense.
If they wipe it out, then there is some federal funding that can be available to them for doing the right thing. If they choose not to wipe it out, they have no choice. We will then cancel it. But the idea is just to eliminate this medical debt. It's something that hospitals are making way too much profit off, and we can provide some assistance for the hospitals who will do the right thing. The federal government can do that. It's affordable, and it is the right thing to do. And frankly, it's the first step. And then we need Medicare for all, so we don't have this continual debt piling up. But expect in the next couple months us to introduce it. And Joseph, what everyone here on the call is doing and sharing their stories is so important, because this is something that members of Congress across the country need to realize affects real people, is affecting their constituents, and they should sign on. Frankly, even if they don't agree on Medicare for all, they should at least sign on to the proposition that people pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 in debt.
And Representative, let me ask you this. So canceling medical debt.
So, and it's funny now, I'm looking at this for a time now, but like, Ro was mentioning like, oh, it should be on the hospitals, right?
Right.
Many hospitals now, they're not necessarily public anymore. They're private corporations now.
Yep.
So you can't necessarily blame the hospitals that put people in debt. It's the lobbyists or the corporations that own these hospitals and like Big Pharma and that's what something he doesn't mention. And you have to wonder why he doesn't. You know, he's just kind of putting the blame on the hospitals as if they're responsible for the bills that we pay, which it could, I don't want to necessarily put the blame on the hospitals when it should be the corporations that own these hospitals that are responsible. So interesting how Ro kind of doesn't mention like the corruption at the very top.
Yep.
On this at all in terms of people being in medical debt.
Not surprised though.
Yeah. Okay, we can continue.
Is a core part of our policy agenda. It's being done around the country. Jurisdictions are states, cities, DC government, Cleveland recently are passing legislation to use American Rescue Act funds to wipe out medical debt. That being said, that is, that's an important fix, right? We want to wipe the slate clean. What do we got to do beyond Medicare for all? What do we have to do to make sure that even if Kristen's medical debt gets wiped out, or Denise's medical debt gets wiped out, or Betsy's medical debt gets wiped out, what do we got to do to make sure the system doesn't keep operating like it does? Because we do know, as one of our town hall folks said, it seems like every time I go see a healthcare provider, I get a bill, and it's pretty outrageous.
So stop right there.
Well,
so basically he just asked, okay, so let's assume that we get this thing passed, that medical debt will get passed. What's the next step from there to get Medicare for all? So that all of that essentially is what he's asking. So let's see what Rose says. Yeah.
Solution to Kristen and Denise's issues are Medicare for all, because that would not have copays. You wouldn't have these outrageous premiums. Everyone would pay a small fee to have national health insurance, and you wouldn't have these outrageous bills. But short of that, we've got to restrict the ability of the people to have outrageous bills, these hospitals. I mean, there's got to be a restriction on harassing, on collecting medical debt from individuals. We can say that, they can go after, I guess, the private insurance companies until we have private insurance companies, but they should not be allowed to go after the patient, the individual. But, that is a cosmetic, it's a cosmetic change, a Band-Aid solution. What we really need is...
that's a Band-Aid solution, he says. What we really need is Medicare for all, right?
Right.
So why didn't he force a vote on that? Why didn't he, in the middle of a pandemic, when you had all the leverage?
You had all the leverage and you had all the attention.
Playing off Nancy Pelosi's own ego and ambition. Like,
But also, you notice how the question was asked, what's the next step to getting Medicare for all? He didn't
right.
answer. He
No.
just kind of went back to, oh, we need to do this, this, this. So, and I want to,
Well, his
and I
answer
have
was
this,
that we need to do Medicare for, like, that was his answer. How do we do it?
right,
Well, we need to do it. Like, that was it.
right. So, and I don't want to necessarily throw Medicare for Medicare for all under the bus,
Yeah.
but that's what I've asked them, online is, what's your plan moving forward? Because Ro Khanna, and I think he's being very careful here, like he's trying to still kind of give the illusion of him being progressive in terms of saying, yeah, we need Medicare for all, but he doesn't give any direction as to what are the next steps now in order to get there. And I
Right.
asked this from certain people from March for Medicare for All, like, what are your next steps in order to get there?
Yeah.
I hate saying this, and I don't want to call them out like that. They didn't give me an answer.
Right.
And I said that in terms of, and I mentioned this on stream, like, there was a possibility that my mom needed dialysis. Fortunately, right now, like, she doesn't need to. So thank God she doesn't, at least for now. But my mom is turning 80, this summer, like, and her health has been an issue, since, I was a teenager. Like, she's had, like, ongoing issues, like, so she's gotten away with it for now, but there's no telling how long it will be before I will have to kind of think about this in terms of her healthcare again.
Yeah.
And I asked, people in that organization, like, out concern of my mom and anger, like, for the possibility of her saying, I don't know how I'm going to pay for my care. And I'm on Medicaid, like, and they couldn't give me an answer.
Yeah.
They just said, I'm sorry what your mom was going through this. So I was very frustrated with the idea of like, but this is what you guys should be doing right now. And these are the things that you should be telling Ro Khanna, like, this is what you should be doing. And this is how we can use our grassroots organizing to help elevate this issue so that people can feel more confidence in people that are involved, in this, that there is some movement going, that there's actually like a progression going. As I said, this just feels like random. And I think this is only because, Ro Khanna said in interviews, there's no way they're going to get Medicare for all at this point.
Right.
Not. So, as you said, Reef, this is just merely, and I'm fine with a Band-Aid depending on the situation. But you also need to kind of take care of the root cause of the issue and kind of get to that.
With anything, you could have thrown a lot of stuff into this bill. Like, you could have thrown dealing with like pharmaceutical oversight. Like, I mean, like markups, and you could have put restrictions on these companies anywhere. I guarantee you there isn't. Or for insurance companies.
Right.
Like, about how much they need to pay for particular things. You could have thrown that in here too. And how much coverage they need to give. Like, if you're gonna if you're gonna ask for, like, if you're gonna play political games about trying to appear progressive, like, go for it.
Especially if you're making this an executive order.
And meanwhile, what's he going to tell you to do on this next election? Like,
vote for Joe Biden. But again, but here's my other thing. Because we've seen this with student loan debt. Like, what if it gets challenged in court?
Yeah.
Like, these are the things that I'm thinking about now in terms of what we've seen over the past couple of years. Like, and I'm sure they weren't necessarily going to answer this here. But in my mind, I'm kind of like, okay, so let's say, yeah, it goes through. What if it gets challenged? How are you going to counter that? You know, number one, you have to get Joe Biden to kind of convince him to do it. So what are you going to say or do to convince him to do this executive order? Like, what are you demanding from him? Or are you willing to withhold from him? And again, you have leverage now, given that you're in an election year. You could say, you know, like, I will not vote, like, I will not endorse you.
Yeah.
Like, you can very easily say that right now, but you won't, because
what do you think he says next? That's the question. You know,
well, let's
he's
keep
rambled
playing
for
yeah, but let's see what he does say next.
A long-term solution, which is Medicare for all.
And Bernie, Representative Jayapal, you other members of the CPC are going to be rolling out Medicare for all next Monday. And then after that, legislation on ending medical debt, canceling medical debt. You know, one of the things that I think is significant is that hospitals get billions of dollars from the U.S. government. Hospitals are federal contractors. They get billions of dollars. The majority of their revenue is from programs like Medicare and Medicaid. And the administration has used that funding authority to, you know, do some regulation. Do you agree that the, companies, hospitals, whether for-profit, not-profit, that get federal funding should be held to a higher standard? They should not be able to price gouge patients and engage in these predatory collections practices?
Yes, and that's where I think the executive order comes in. I mean, you don't need even Congress for that. What you can have is the president signing legislation, signing an executive order that says if you get federal funding, you can't engage in price gouging. You can't engage in collections from the individual. You can, you simply cannot go and put a debt collector on an individual or stick individuals with these bills, or we're going to stop the federal funding. We're going to stop your hospital from getting the federal funding. Now, our bill, Sanders and my bill, eliminates it completely, whether you're getting federal funding or not. And it actually allows hospitals to apply to a federal fund to make sure that they have the incentive to do it. So it's the cleanest way of doing it. But short of that, we can stop at least the most egregious practices with the leverage that we have with the federal funds. And that is why we've got to push the president to do it. And, you know, as it turns out with a lot of things, Joseph, good policy that helps people turns out to be good politics. You know, if you do things that help people's lives, if you make childcare free or childcare $10 a day, as I've been pushing, if you make it Medicare for all so that people have health care without premiums and without huge deductibles, if you help make college free or vocational education free, guess what? People tend to think that that's good politics because they see that this is something actually that's going to help my life. If the president says, I'm going to eliminate medical debt, think about the millions of Americans who he could help with a stroke of his pen. And if he says, I'm going to go push for that if I get reelected, think about all of the people whose lives he could change. I mean, imagine wiping out credit card bills, just like we're trying to wipe out student debt. Even more urgent, I would say, is wiping out medical debt.
That's right. And the truth is, I think this would be resonant with the American people generally, and with progressives in particular. But it would be resonant because with the American people generally, because, you know, medical debt, as we said earlier on this call, number one cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States. Even after we passed the ACA, it's outrageous. And the president, the administration has the power to fix it. You know, the administration's issued a couple of executive orders on medical debt, around credit reporting, around urging all the agencies of government to work together on medical debt. But at the end of the day, what we haven't gotten, and then what we are collectively pushing for, is making sure the president uses the power he has as a regulator and funder of the American healthcare industry, using that to police the worst behavior.
Any final thoughts on this? I have a couple here.
I mean,
I just
yeah, and we'll get to that last slide too before we get to a lot of it. But
Yeah.
what are they doing? One, what have they done with student debt? We've covered that on this channel before, recently, in fact.
Last week, 2 weeks ago now.
You know, he's talking about a stroke of a pen. Those pens have been stroked, like, already, friend, like, on student debt. So how are you going to, a strongly worded letter? Right. You know, I mean, you're obviously trying to implore him to use this. The issue is, Collin, how are they going to get a vote on any of these two things? Yes, they made the bill. That doesn't mean that people vote on the bill.
Right.
What do they need to do for that to happen?
Right. And I just thought of this. Like, have the bigger channels talked about this?
No.
No.
No, I mean, it just happened.
No, I mean, but the big story, obviously, is Crystal and Kyle got married.
Yeah.
But they're allegedly, like proponents for Medicare for All.
Right.
I mean,
meanwhile,
confuse them a little bit, but like you would think that all these channels that would say like, "Oh, I want Medicare for All," would actually promote this, especially given that this is Bernie's organization. That you'll feel like they'll just kind of go in and kind of fall in line and actually trying to promote this as best as they can. Crickets. So, you know,
you have this to finish this out.
I do. I think in a way it gives me no pleasure to refer to this.
Yeah.
But I think it's important because you know, like I had my concerns about Savage Joy, you know, and Ricky, you know, going to Congress because I just felt like it was more of a political ploy for Roe versus for them actually getting something passed. But, you know, like I was just curious to see how this would, you know, amount to, you know, in terms of them meeting with Roe last year. And, you know, so Savage Joy tweeted this out on Monday. And she said, "Beyond disappointed right now. As some of you know, March for Medicare for All rep with Khanna in his DC office in April 2022, 13 months ago, to discuss national improved Medicare for All and medical debt. I brought over $15,000 in medical debt I accrued despite having insurance. We spoke in depth for over an hour, and by the time we left, it was decided that we would be doing Medicare debt cancellation legislation. Medicare for All then met with two other reps and a legislative assistant to get them on board with the bill, and were successful. We've exchanged constant communication with Roe and his team about the medical debt cancellation legislation. We had a Zoom meeting last month with them and discussed the bill, what is in it, and what needed to be added. Because of our continuous involvement for over a year, we were told that we'd be sent the bill before it goes to the floor so we can give our input. A few days ago, Roe sent me a DM promoting a live stream forum he is doing with Our Revolution tonight on our bill we've worked on. Today, I was told that there are 3 other speakers, none of whom are for March for Medicare for All. We have been proud of being a group of volunteer organizers who are able to get legislation going because of our tremendously hard work. We were the catalyst for this bill, and we put a lot of work into it. But we now find ourselves removed from the discussion. We are still incredibly proud of what we accomplished and will continue to do great things. However, I am not to be quiet when being slighted." So they weren't even... I mean, we'll mention them, but they weren't given the platform to share.
Yep.
So what does that tell you?
They don't want people willing to say what they actually want and how this might be issues.
But I just feel like this is just kind of his way, because as I said, our revolution, this is like, and we kind of talk about this with Chris Smalls, like the moment you step in the White House or in Congress, you're playing by their rules. Yeah. And actually, just as an aside, I had a problem with Joy actually going there, given that she is like mostly blind. Like, why can Ro go to her?
Yeah.
Like, why
you got no
Joy
friends in Washington, D.C. Your enemy is laughing at you.
Like, why can Ro take the time to go to Pennsylvania to meet with Joy? Like, why should she have to spend money and like hotel in order to go there? Like, so, but this is what they do. They take grassroots activism and they morph it into something that is not reflective of what constituents want.
Well,
but then they take that narrative and then run with it for it to die.
I wonder if they're willing to, if they don't get a vote, for this, right?
Right.
Are they willing to start working on ballot initiatives state by state for this?
Right.
And
that's and we talked about that, just before we went live. This kind of thing, like canceling medical debt, to me, and this is just to me, seems to be, it would be more effective, as you said, maybe as a ballot initiative measure. So going statewide to promote this and seeing how that grows from there. And then you're able to build that coalition, around that idea to bring it up on the federal level. As I said, this just seemed to come out of nowhere, like in terms of Rose suddenly talking about it. And I'm fairly certain that he's trying to use this for his presidential ambitions in the near future. We're not sure when that's going to happen, but he'll be able to say now, oh, I promoted this and all this kind of stuff, and use that as his platform on the backs of people who actually did the work and the research to try to get this bill through. It's not going to pass. You don't have the support for it in the way that we did for Force the Vote several years ago. No one has talked about this at all. There's been no promotion for this at all. So where's the support going to come from this?
Yeah.
Independent media has not talked about this at all. So, but that, again, that's what I said. If this was your plan, but if it was leading towards Medicare for all, if there were tangible steps that you were looking to do towards getting there, I can be for this. But again, as you said, this just feels like a compromise of the compromise. They know they can't get Medicare for all, but they know that they have to do something for Joy and them. So this was kind of like the compromise that they came to, but that's not what Joy kind of went in with.
No.
She went in with both.
Yeah.
And settled for one, which is not going to go anywhere.
Yes.
So,
like, it's performative nonsense anyway. They're not going to be able to get a bill for it. Like, and you're not even willing to take that performative measure there. So, like, why are we still engaging with these folks? Anyway.
Right.